you're ready, you may begin.
Can everyone see this? Yes? Okay, thank you, Caleb. That was actually a wonderful introduction for my topic. Thank you guys all for being here today. I would much rather be in Neville presenting to you all, but due to the circumstances, this is the next great thing. And if you thought you were done learning about serial killers, think again, because we have another serial killer presentation. So my topic is Fascinated with Serial Murder, the Media is to Blame. And I'm Julia Marsh, and this is Knowledge Capstone. So like Caleb, my inspiration for this project was Truman Capote's In Cold Blood. And I chose to focus on this specific topic because of one of the books we read. It's based on the Clutter family murders in Holcomb, Kansas in 1959. And it was the murders were committed by Perry Smith and Dick Hitchcock, which you can see their mugshots on the screen. It was my favorite book from the class and is one of the reasons why I chose the topic, along with the fact that I am one of the members in the population who are obsessed with serial murder and serial killers. So we're going to dive into why that is a thing and how the media actually influences and helps the fascination with serial murders. So my thesis, I will be focusing on 3 different documentaries of serial killers, all focusing on a different famous serial killer. But documentaries such as Conversations with a Killer, the Ted Bundy tapes, H.H. Holmes, America's First Serial Killer, and Very Scary People all construct a sympathetic portrait of a killer, then their violent past merits, and treat their serial murders as a form of entertainment, which only aids in the population's fascination. So the first documentary, Conversations with a Killer, the Ted Bundy tapes, it focuses on the notorious 20th century serial killer Ted Bundy. In case you don't know, Ted Bundy was an American serial killer and rapist who terrorized women in California, Colorado, Florida, Idaho, Oregon, Utah, and Washington during the 1970s. So this documentary in particular is a television show, and it focuses on the interviews of 2 journalists, Stephen McGaud and Hugh Ainsworth, who met with Bundy while he was at the Florida State Prison on awaiting death row and convinced him to tell the story of his life and murders. So this interviews with these journalists was actually the first time that Bundy opened up about his life and his serial murders. So it's 4 episodes, and these episodes showcase different interviews with Bundy and live footage of Bundy, his family, friends, some surviving victims and victims' families, as well as having interviews with police who actually helped catch Bundy and were on his case and helped put him behind bars. So then the second serial killer documentary that we will be focusing on is H.H. Holmes, America's First Serial Killer. So this focuses on serial killer Dr. Henry Howard Holmes, and he was actually the United States' first serial killer. He was a murderer in Chicago, with the peak of his murders occurring during the World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago in 1893. He murdered his victims in order to steal their properties and even built a house designed specifically to kill, known as the Murder Castle. And you can see kind of an image of the Murder Castle down below. So this Murder Castle featured soundproof rooms, secret passages, and a disorienting maze of hallways and staircases. The rooms were also allegedly outfitted with trap doors over chutes that dropped Holmes' unsuspecting victims to the building's basement. So this particular documentary showcases experts that discuss Holmes, his murders, and even has excerpts from Holmes' personal diary, where he discusses and describes his life and his numerous murders in his diary. Okay. And then finally, the last documentary we'll be focusing on is Very Scary People. So this one is actually a television show that focuses on numerous serial killers and serial rapists. So for this research, I will only be focusing on episodes 5 and 10 that focus on John Wayne Gacy, also known as the Killer Clown. So Gacy was a murderer in the 1970s in Chicago who preyed on young boys and men. He was well known for his community for being very sociable, involved in politics, and for playing a clown at children's birthday parties and charitable events. So he exhibited traits of sadism early on, which is a psychosexual disorder, in which sexual urges are gratified by the infliction of pain on another person. So this led him to torture and rape his victims before killing them and burying their bodies under the crawlspace of their home. So these episodes feature personal interviews with Gacy from when he was in prison and waiting trial, and then also have interviews from experts and his childhood best friend, as well as some family members. So just a background on serial murder, all of these men that we will be focusing on are serial murders, and serial murder is the unlawful homicide of at least two people carried out by the same person or persons in separate events occurring at different times. So on the bottom, we have Ted Bundy. He confessed to 28 murders, although it is estimated that he killed well over 100 people over a span of a few years. Then next, we have H.H. Holmes. He confessed to around 130 murders, but researchers believe that the real number is more than 200 murders over a span of a few years. And then finally, we have John Wayne Gacy. He murdered 33 young men and boys over a span of 7 years. So why the fascination? So media about the topic of serial murder has been on a constant rise in popularity. The subject of serial murder has inspired countless popular novels and has become a virtual subgenre of crime literature by the 1980s. So there are many theories as to why serial murder is such a popular topic, but I'm arguing that is because the media turns serial killers into celebrity monsters, portray them as evil geniuses, and heavily play into their psychological stressors to generate sympathy from its audience. So the first one, celebrity monsters. So there is a good chance that before I started this presentation, you at least knew one of these serial killers, if not all of them. They are relatively household names, and even if you don't know anything about them, you at least have some sort of idea, know their name. So Scott Bond, he has a PhD in serial murder, and he actually teaches classes on like psychological stressors and all this stuff. But he believes that real serial life killers are transformed into larger than life celebrity monsters through the combined efforts of law enforcement authorities and the news and entertainment media that feed the public's appetite. So they're turned into celebrity monsters because their good traits are often exaggerated and heavily played onto with their lives. Because with these documentaries, their lives are clearly played out onto screen, and it's almost like a movie. So Ted Bundy probably personifies this monster celebrity best because his murder trial was the first one, like the first murder trial to ever be televised, and he heavily played into the celebrity status. He was charming and good looking, and he even had a fan club of girls who claimed that he was too good looking to have committed all these murders. And actually, all of these serial killers that we are discussing today all have various fan clubs who follow their murders closely and study who they are as people. So documentaries make the serial killer seem more personable, almost like it's your friend or a neighbor. Because as you watch the documentary, you learn all about their childhood, what they went through, their whole life story, and you get to know them as a real person. It's not like you're watching a serial killer anymore. You're watching the person, you're going to know them, and it's no longer like a random stranger. You feel like you know these people. Okay, so next, evil geniuses. So Christine Sartecchi argues that serial killers and their crimes are played up into a mystical status, claiming that part of the fascination with serial murders might stem from their near mystical status. For instance, it is common for them to be depicted as evil geniuses who can outsmart the investigators trying to catch them. So Ted Bundy, H.H. Holmes, and John Wayne Gacy are all evil geniuses who outsmarted the investigators out to catch them in their respective documentaries. So Bundy managed to escape from prison and evade authorities for months. His documentary commonly says how he had such a high IQ and how he was a genius man. So Ted Bundy's evading the police may be due to his intelligence, and his documentary definitely plays that he was an evil genius who was too smart. But it's most likely due to the fact that all of his killings were in different states, and during this time, the investigative authorities actually were not sharing all of the information that they had regarding the cases. So once the various police forces began to share the information that they had for their cases, the their commonalities of the cases began to make sense, and they were able to piece together all the unsolved cases that were linked to one another in the craftsmanship of Ted Bundy. So the documentary kind of plays into that and show that how like technology was not ahead of its, like was not up to par, but really it's not due to his evil genius status. It's due to the fact of lack of communication. So Holmes was able to get away with his crimes for a year. Again, this was during like the 1800s, and so technology was near non-existent. They had photographs and everything, but the authorities were actually unaware of Holmes's murders for a long period of time. And I think this was really due to the fact that during this time, it's harder to notice when someone went missing. And most of his victims were actually strangers coming to Chicago to check out the World Fair. So their family often didn't realize that they were missing for months on end. So, however, the documentary H.H. Holmes, America's First Serial Killer, plays the police's lack of knowledge up to the fact that Holmes was an evil genius who was too smart for his own good, that he was too crafty and too slick, so no one ever caught on. But in all reality, I think it was due to the time period of just not knowing when anyone was missing. So then finally, Very Scary People makes it clear that John Wayne Gacy was known for being sociable and well-loved by his community. In fact, he was so well-known and loved that whenever one of his victims escaped, Jeffrey Ringgold, and went to the police and claimed that, hey, John Wayne Gacy, this man molested me, they actually didn't believe him because it did not fit the stereotype that John Wayne Gacy had of being such a sociable person in the community and well-loved. So during his investigation, the documentary shows that he was very comfortable with authorities throughout the whole investigation and even helped with their investigation into him. So Gacy had friends in high places, and his friends would tell them what the police were talking about, what they knew about, and even what they were planning on doing in their investigation. And he was actually so comfortable with the authorities that he invited the authorities over to his house for drinks and dinner while they were investigating him for kidnapping and murders. So in this, one of the things that I actually really like about this documentary is that one of the police officers who helped put him behind bars even states that Gacy being a registered clown was also genius, because clowns can go around on pretty much do whatever they want, like, because you're not going to suspect a clown. And he says that's why clowns can get away with anything. Clowns can get away with murder. So Ted Bundy, H.H. Holmes, and John Wayne Gacy have all been portrayed as evil geniuses in the respective documentaries, which only skews the perception of their horrendous crimes, but it also makes it an interesting topic to showcase. Okay, and then finally, we have psychological stressors. So another reason why some people are so infatuated with serial murders is that often these people have endured some sort of traumatic event, had a rough upbringing that caused them to become murderers, or they're quite literally psychopaths. So while research is still ongoing on why a serial killer becomes a serial killer, it's believed that psychological stressors are a common trait shared by serial killers. So these stressors can include being raised in a chaotic family environment or exhibiting some antisocial and borderline personality traits. So it's believed that most serial killers are led to kill because they suffer from various mental disorders. So by showcasing the hard times in their lives, these documentaries are able to show a deeply personal side to these serial killers, and they're evoking sympathy for them because of how hard and traumatizing these life experiences were. So this bottom one is Ted Bundy. He was bullied as a child because he was seen as an outcast and had a speech impediment. And he also had a difficult relationship with his stepfather and was very quiet. He didn't have a lot of friends and really kept to himself, even though in his head he thought he was very popular. Childhood friends in his documentary show that he was actually like just played alone most of the time. So Bundy was also later seen lacking empathy in his interviews. And this is showcased in the documentary with one of the interviews with him. He would often, when talking about his crimes, and especially in this documentary, would talk about it in a third person and kind of like he was telling almost like a bedtime story. So he would dramatize his stories and even had pleasure recounting his murders. So he would tell the murder stories in great detail and would use phrases like, whoever committed this murder probably did this, and then they did this, and then would graphically go in depth about how these murders were carried out and what the murderer supposedly felt while completing these murders. So when it was asked if he felt any remorse for his crimes, he would stumble to answer the question and said that he had diligently dealt with his feelings with the help of God. But in other words, these feelings really no longer existed for him, and in all likelihood, they never did, and he never felt remorse. So Holmes is the second picture. He was also an outcast and bullied due to his high intelligence that he had at a young age. And his documentary shows that he was very interested in medicine from an early age, and he would often trap animals and perform surgeries on them, which obviously did not make him much of any friends. So Holmes went on to the School of University of Michigan, which seems like an impressive feat, but his documentary actually shows that his going to medical school only furthered his psychopathic intentions because he was allowed to play with the human cadavers. And then finally, we have John Wayne Gacy. So John Wayne Gacy probably has the most messed up childhood of all the serial killers. And experts in his documentary actually claim that there are a lot of stories about his childhood that are somehow supposed to explain how he got to be the way he is. But if anything can be pointed to, it's the relationship with his father. So from a young age, his father kind of told him that he was worthless and was never going to amount to much. So he was named for the actor John Wayne because his father wanted a successful kid, but instead he got a sickly, overweight, sort of clumsy kid who was bullied and teased a lot. So his best friend, Barry Boschelli, is actually in this interview a lot, in this documentary a lot, giving interviews and discussing John Wayne Gacy's life. And he says that Mr. Gacy would call him dumb and stupid frequently and was physically and emotionally abusive to Gacy. So another traumatic event that actually occurred to Gacy was that he was sexually molested as a young boy, and nothing was ever done because of this. Gacy was afraid to tell anyone that he was sexually molested because the man who sexually molested him was actually one of his father's friends, and he knew that his father would beat him if he told anybody. And then
Julia, we have 1 minute, okay?
Okay, I'm almost done.
Okay.
And then another psychological stressor for Gacy is that it can be inferred that he was either a closeted gay or transgendered man. And his best friend recalls another instance where Gacy showed him a woman's dress outfit and asked how he would be dressed as a woman. And Boschelli actually now feels guilty for it because they both played it off and never talked about it, suppressing who Gacy really was. So all three of these documentaries play into the difficulties that all these killers face for them, but they're able to create it in such a sympathetic light that you can't help but feel sorry for them and wonder if any of these events hadn't have happened, would they have become the way they were? Okay, so in conclusion, we are obsessed with serial killers, myself included. So whatever the reason that you may be obsessed with serial killers, documentaries only help play into our fantasies because they exaggerate their good qualities, create them to be celebrity monsters, and play at their mystical statuses of being evil geniuses. Everything that they are is exaggerated to only cater to what we are already feeling as people interested in these serial killers. And they create this sympathetic portrait that makes us be drawn to them, no matter how bad they are. So here are my mini works cited. It's 2 slides. And then are there any questions?
Thank you, Julia. If you have questions, please, at this point, direct them to the chat. Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna kind of do those 2 questions at the same time. Okay, sorry, a lot of coming in. So I believe that the childhood trauma does have a big effect into turning them into the way they are, because a lot of times people are suppressed and don't know how to deal with their emotions. So I think therapy would have helped a lot, and they really didn't know how to deal with their emotions, and this was just how it was able to it just kind of like spewed out into killing people. And so if they had a way to like correctly bottle their emotions and to work through their issues, I think a lot could be done. I actually chose these serial killers because of their kind of already celebrity status. And John Wayne Gacy, I actually added him to my presentation like 3 days ago. I was watching a serial killer documentary and it came on. I was like, oh my gosh, this is perfect, and added it to my documentary presentation literally 3 days ago. So I'm still obsessed with it, even through these through this research. I think it only made me more interested in serial killers because it has so many great things that you can research and figure out why.
And maybe one more question, Julia, from a faculty member.
Yes. These all documentaries are available on Netflix. The Ted Bundy tapes is on Netflix. The H.H. Holmes is on Amazon Prime, and Very Scary People is on Hulu.
And you can do one more.
One more, and then okay, yes. So this obsession says about humanity. One of the things that I didn't really touch on in my presentation is that serial killers are kind of like watching a car wreck. It's so awful, and you can't turn away because you're just so interested, because partly, one, we can't imagine ourselves personally being able to commit the unthinkable crime of taking someone's life. And so that's kind of what draws us to it, because it seems like a kind of a different being, a different creature. Like, we don't understand it, but we really want to try and understand it. So if that makes sense. We are obsessed with things that we can't understand and can't control.
Oh, all right. Thank you very much, Julia. Well done. Okay, so now we are going to transition to our next presenter, whom I believe is Brandon. Brandon, if you are here, I'd like you to unsilence your microphone and go into present now mode.